I read the note once, and in that moment, I realized my son was asking for help without making a sound. It was halfway through Thanksgiving dinner, the kind with too much food and too many people talking over each other, plates clinking, someone laughing too loudly at the far end of the table, and I felt his hand brush mine under the tablecloth just once, quick, almost accidental, and then something thin and folded was pressed into my palm. I didn't look at him right away. I kept my eyes on my plate, on the slice of turkey I hadn't touched, on the gravy slowly spreading across the edge like it had somewhere else to be. "Mom," he said out loud a second later, his voice normal, steady. "You want more stuffing?" I nodded. "I'm fine, honey." My voice sounded like it always did. Calm. Even. Like nothing had changed. But something had. I could feel it sitting in my hand, light as paper, heavy as something else entirely. I waited. I let a few more minutes pass. His wife was talking about a vacation they were planning, somewhere warm, somewhere expensive, somewhere that required a kind of life I knew my son hadn't built on his own. She laughed, and he laughed with her, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've known that boy for 47 years. I know the difference. I shifted in my chair, just enough to slide the folded note into my lap, hidden by the napkin. I still didn't open it. Not yet. I kept eating. One bite. Then another. I nodded when someone asked me a question. I even smiled when it was expected. "Everything okay, Mom?" my son asked, and this time I looked at him. Just for a second. His eyes flicked to my hand, then away. Too fast. "Of course," I said. "Why wouldn't it be?" He held my gaze for half a heartbeat longer than usual, and that was all I needed. That was when I knew this wasn't nothing. That this wasn't a joke, or a grocery list, or some small thing passed between a mother and her son out of habit. This was something he didn't want anyone else to see. Something he couldn't say out loud. I waited until dessert was being served, until everyone was distracted, until the room had shifted into that comfortable noise. People mistake for safety. Then I unfolded the paper beneath the table, slow, careful, the way you handle something fragile even before you know what it is. The handwriting was his. I could tell from the first letter. But it wasn't neat like it used to be. The lines were uneven, the ink pressed harder in some places, lighter in others, like his hand hadn't been steady when he wrote it. "Mom, I'm scared," it said. I stopped breathing for just a second. The room kept moving around me, forks scraping plates, someone asking for coffee, his wife reaching across him to refill a glass like she owned the space between us. I kept reading. "She's taking," and then it stopped. No period. No explanation. Just those two words hanging there, unfinished. I folded the note back along the same crease, exactly the way it had been when he gave it to me. I slid it into my purse. And I said nothing. I drove home that night with the radio off, the road stretching out in front of me like it always had, familiar and quiet, but something inside me had shifted just enough that even the streetlights felt different. The note stayed in my purse, untouched, like if I opened it again too soon it might say something worse. I have learned over the years that panic makes people careless, and I have never been a careless woman. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat there for a moment with the engine still running, my hands resting on the steering wheel, and I replayed the evening in my mind piece by piece, not the words, but the spaces between them. The way my son had not reached for his phone once. The way his wife had answered questions for him before he could speak. The way he had laughed half a second too late, like he was waiting for permission. I turned the car off and went inside. The house was exactly as I had left it, quiet, steady, the clock on the wall ticking in that reliable way that has nothing to do with what is happening in the world outside it. I set my purse on the kitchen table and finally took the note out again. The paper was creased from being folded so tightly, and when I smoothed it flat, I noticed something I had missed before. There was an impression beneath the last line, faint, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. I tilted the paper toward the light. "She's taking," and then, just below it, pressed into the page but not fully written, the start of another word. A curve. The beginning of a letter. I narrowed my eyes and traced it gently with my fingertip. It could have been an S. Or maybe a C. Not enough to guess. Not enough to be sure. I sat down and reached for the small magnifying glass I kept in the drawer, the one I used for reading fine print on prescriptions. I held it over the paper and studied the indentation again. Slow. Careful. The way you look at something when you know it matters. Taking, I said quietly to the empty room. Taking what, David? The question hung there, unanswered. I folded the note again, but not the way he had. I folded it once, then placed it flat on the table and stepped back. I needed to see the whole picture, not just the words. I walked into the living room and picked up the phone. I did not call him. That would have been the first mistake. Instead, I scrolled to a number I had not used in years. It rang twice. Law offices of Bennett and Clark, a woman's voice answered, professional, measured. This is Laura Hayes, I said. My voice was steady. I would like to schedule a consultation. There was a brief pause on the other end. Of course, Ms. Hayes. What is this regarding? I looked back at the note on the table. Documentation, I said. And I would prefer the earliest appointment you have. After I hung up, I stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet settle back into place. Then I did something I had not done in a very long time. I went to the hallway closet, pushed aside the winter coats, and reached for the small metal lockbox bolted to the floor behind them. The key was exactly where it had always been. I opened it and looked inside, not at the money, not at the certificates, but at the folder with my son's name on it. Birth certificate. Early school records. Copies of documents I had kept because I have always believed in having proof of things, even when you hope you will never need it. I took the folder out and set it on the table next to the note. If you're asking me for help, I said softly, then you already know I am the only one who will see what you cannot say. I did not feel angry. Not yet. I felt something colder. Something clearer. The kind of clarity that comes when a story does not add up and you finally decide to stop accepting it at face value. I turned off the kitchen light and left the note where it was, illuminated by the small lamp above the stove, like evidence waiting to be understood. I have always believed that if you want to understand what is happening now, you have to be honest about what happened before, so I went back further than the documents, further than the messages, all the way to the version of my son that existed before anyone else had a say in who he became. He was not a fearful child. He was not uncertain. I remember him at 8 years old, standing in the kitchen with a chair pulled up to the counter because he was too short to reach, insisting on making pancakes by himself. I can do it, Mom, he told me, his hands covered in flour, his voice steady in a way that made you believe him. And he did. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but he did it without asking for help twice. That was who he was. Independent. Careful. Quiet, but not afraid. I carried that memory with me as I looked at the timeline I had started, adding years, then narrowing it down to months, then weeks. Something had changed, and it had not happened all at once. It never does. The first shift I marked was 2 years ago, right around the time he got married. I remember the day he told me. We were sitting in this same kitchen, and he kept turning the ring on his finger like it was still new to him. She is organized, he said. She helps me stay on track. I nodded at the time. That sounded like a good thing. And she likes to handle the paperwork, he added, almost as an afterthought. I wrote that down now, underlined it once. Handle the paperwork. I kept going. 6 months after that, he stopped asking me to look over documents. A year later, he stopped mentioning finances altogether. Then came the smaller things. Birthdays where the call came late. Holidays where conversations felt shorter, thinner. And then the detail that had seemed harmless at the time but now sat differently in my mind. Last spring, when I had visited their house, I noticed the mail was stacked neatly by the door, all addressed to both of them, even things I knew had once been his alone. We keep everything together now, she had said with a smile when she caught me looking. I had smiled back. I did not question it then. I do now. I stood up from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street, letting the pieces arrange themselves without forcing them. Control does not arrive loudly. It settles in, one decision at a time, until the person inside it no longer remembers what it felt like to decide anything alone. You did not become afraid overnight, I said softly, thinking of my son. Something taught you to be. My phone buzzed on the table behind me. A message this time. From him. I turned and picked it up. Can we have dinner this week? Just us. I read it twice. Just us. That was new. That had not happened in a long time. I typed back slowly. Of course. You pick the place. The response came quicker than I expected. I will come to you. I paused, my thumb hovering over the screen. He had not asked to come here in over a year. All right, I replied. Wednesday evening. I set the phone down and looked back at the timeline, at the note, at the document with the added name, and I felt something settle deeper into place. This was not just about money. It was not just about paperwork. It was about access. Who signs? Who sees? Who decides? And more importantly, who does not? I walked back to the table and added one more line beneath the others. Wednesday. Conversation. Then I circled it once, firm, deliberate. If you could not finish that sentence in ink, I said quietly, my eyes on the note, then I will make sure you get to finish it out loud. I closed the folder, but I did not put it away. Not this time. Some things, once opened, are meant to stay that way until the truth has nowhere left to hide. Wednesday came slower than I expected, not because the hours dragged, but because I refused to fill them with guesses. I kept myself steady, the way I always have, doing the things that anchor a day to something real. I cleaned the kitchen. I set out 2 plates instead of 1. I chose the old ceramic ones, the ones he used growing up, not because they were special, but because they were familiar. Familiar things remind people who they used to be. At exactly 6 o'clock, I heard his car pull into the driveway. I did not go to the door right away. I waited until I heard the engine shut off, until I heard his footsteps on the front path, measured, slower than I remembered. Then I opened the door before he could knock. He stood there for a second, like he had not expected me to be that quick. Hi, Mom, he said. His smile came a moment late. Hi, I replied, stepping aside. Come in. He walked past me, glancing around the house in that quiet way people do when they are trying to place themselves back into a space they have been away from too long. Smells the same, he said. It usually does, I answered. He gave a small nod, then followed me into the kitchen. He sat where he always used to sit, without thinking about it, and that told me more than anything he could have said out loud. I placed the plate in front of him. You did not have to cook, he said. I know, I replied. I wanted to. We ate for a few minutes without speaking much. Forks against plates. The soft hum of the refrigerator. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Then he set his fork down. Mom, he started, then stopped. I did not look up right away. I took another bite, chewed slowly, gave him the space to continue. Silence is not empty. It is pressure. And pressure reveals things. I have been meaning to talk to you, he said finally. About what? I asked, my voice even. He hesitated. His eyes moved to the window, then back to the table, then briefly to me before dropping again. Just things, he said. I nodded once. That is a wide category. He let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, I guess it is. I reached for my glass of water and took a sip, then set it down carefully. You came here for a reason, I said. You can take your time, but do not pretend there is not one. He went still for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped together like he was holding on to something that might slip if he let go. Have you ever felt like you are not really in control of your own life anymore? He asked quietly. I met his eyes then. Yes, I said. A long time ago. He swallowed. And what did you do? I did not answer immediately. I let the question sit between us, just long enough for him to understand that the answer mattered. I paid attention, I said finally. To everything. He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he had already been afraid of. I think I missed things, he said. At the beginning. Small things. They did not seem like a problem. I watched him carefully. They usually do not, I replied. That is why they work. His jaw tightened slightly at that, and for the first time since he walked in, I saw something real break through the careful version of himself he had been holding together. She handles most of the accounts now, he said. It just made sense at the time. She is better with numbers, more organized. I did not interrupt. And then it became everything, he added. Bills. investments, even the house paperwork. I just signed where I was told to sign. There it was. Not the whole truth, not yet, but a piece of it. Did you read what you were signing? I asked. He looked down at his hands. At first, he said. Not always later. I nodded once. And now? I asked. He did not answer right away. His fingers tightened together slightly. Then, almost under his breath, he said, Now I am not sure what I own anymore. The room went quiet again, but this time it was different. Not comfortable. Not safe. Just clear. I reached for my napkin and folded it once, precise, controlled. Then I looked at him and spoke carefully. You gave me a piece of paper the other night, I said. His head lifted quickly, his eyes locking onto mine. You remember that? He asked. I remember everything that matters, I replied. His breath caught just slightly. I could not finish it, he said. I know, I answered. And then, without raising my voice, without changing my tone, I placed my hand flat on the table between us. So you're going to finish it now? He did not answer right away. His eyes stayed on my hand resting on the table, like it was something solid he could hold onto without actually touching it. Then he let out a slow breath and leaned forward, lowering his voice even though there was no one else in the house. She is taking control, he said finally. Not just the accounts. Everything. I did not move. Define everything, I said. He swallowed, his throat tightening slightly before he spoke again. The house is no longer just mine. The last refinance, she handled it. I signed the papers. I thought it was just to get a better rate. He gave a small, humorless laugh. It was not just that. I nodded once. What else? I asked. He hesitated again, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He did not unlock it right away. He just held it there, staring at the screen like it might push back. She has access to all my emails, he said quietly. She set it up that way. Said it was easier to keep track of things. He looked up at me then, and there it was again, that flicker of something underneath the surface. Not weakness. Not exactly. Something closer to realization. I did not question it, he added. Why would I? I held his gaze. Because it was your life, I said. He flinched slightly at that, not from the words themselves, but from what they implied. He unlocked the phone and scrolled for a moment before turning the screen toward me. Look at this, he said. I leaned forward just enough to see. It was a bank notification. A transfer. Large. Larger than anything I had ever known him to move without a conversation first. When was this? I asked. Last week, he replied. I did not authorize it. Not directly. I looked at him carefully. But you signed something, I said. He nodded. A stack of documents. She said it was for tax restructuring. I did not read every page. There was no accusation in his voice. Just fact. Just the quiet acknowledgement of a decision made too easily. I sat back slowly, letting the pieces settle into place. And the note? I asked. Why not say this out loud that night? He looked away, his jaw tightening again. Because she was watching, he said. She always is. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything else he had said so far. I let them sit there for a moment before responding. Watching how? I asked. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to release something that had been building for too long. Checking my phone. Asking who I talked to. Questioning small things. Not in a way that seems obvious. Just enough that you start to think it is easier not to explain anything at all. He paused, then added quietly, I did not even realize when I stopped telling her everything because I thought I should, and started telling her everything because I thought I had to. I nodded slowly. There is a difference, I said. He looked back at me, and this time he did not look away. I think I lost track of where that line was, he admitted. The room was silent again, but this silence was different. It was not avoidance. It was clarity forming. I reached for the folder beside me and slid it across the table toward him. You did not lose it, I said calmly. You just stopped checking it. He looked down at the folder, then back at me. What is this? He asked. A record, I replied. Of who you were before you started signing things you did not read. He hesitated, then opened it slowly. I watched his expression change as he flipped through the pages, recognition settling in, piece by piece. "Why do you have all this?" he asked quietly. I held his gaze, steady, unshaken. "Because I have been doing this longer than you think," I said. Then I leaned forward slightly, my voice still calm, still controlled, but carrying something sharper underneath. "And because if someone is taking something from you," I continued, "we are going to find out exactly what it is, how it was done, and how to take it back." He did not speak for a long moment after I said that. He just sat there, the folder open in front of him, his fingers resting on the edge of the papers like he was trying to decide whether to hold on or let go. Then he nodded, once, slow and deliberate. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then where do we start?" I did not answer immediately. I reached for the note again, unfolded it, and placed it flat between us. "We start with what you tried to say," I replied. "You wrote that she is taking something. You need to tell me what you think that is." He looked at the note, his eyes tracing the unfinished sentence, and I could see him working through it, not just the words, but everything behind them. "It is not just money," he said finally. "It started there, I think. Or at least that is what I noticed first. But it is more than that now." I nodded slightly. "Go on." He leaned forward, lowering his voice again, even though there was still no one else to hear him. "Decisions," he said. "She makes them before I even know they need to be made. Then she presents them like they are already settled. And if I question it, even a little, she has an answer ready. Always a reason why it is better this way." He paused, then added, "After a while, it feels easier not to question anything at all." I watched him carefully. "That is how control works," I said. "It removes friction." He looked up at me, something sharper in his eyes now. "I did not think of it as control," he admitted. "Not at first." "You were not supposed to," I replied calmly. He exhaled slowly, leaning back again, but this time there was tension in the movement, like he was starting to push against something instead of settling into it. "There is more," he said. "Last month, she suggested we move some assets into a new structure. Said it would protect us long term. I signed the preliminary documents." I held his gaze. "And now?" I asked. "Now I cannot access half of what used to be mine without going through her," he said. The words landed flat, but the meaning behind them did not. I let a few seconds pass before speaking again. "Do you have copies of what you signed?" I asked. He hesitated. "Not all of them," he admitted. "She keeps most of the records. Organized. Filed. Locked." I nodded once, absorbing that. "And passwords?" I asked. "Changed," he said. "She said it was for security." "Of course she did," I replied softly. He looked down at his hands again, but this time he did not retreat into silence. "I feel like I am asking permission for things that used to be mine," he said. "Even small things. Accounts. Information. Access." I leaned forward slightly, just enough to bring his attention back to me. "Then we do not ask," I said. He blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. "What do you mean?" he asked. I kept my voice steady, measured. "We verify. Independently. Quietly." He stared at me for a second, then nodded slowly as the idea settled in. "How?" he asked. I reached for the paper where I had written the timeline and turned it so he could see. "We build a case," I said. "Not for a courtroom yet. For clarity." I pointed to the first entries. Dates. Changes. Documents. Every time something shifted, we mark it. Then we match that to records we can access outside of your home. He leaned in, following along. "Banks," he said. "Public filings," I added. "Property records. Anything that does not rely on her giving you permission to see it." He nodded again, faster this time. "And if we find something?" he asked. I met his eyes, holding them steady. "We do not confront," I said. "Not yet." His brow furrowed slightly. "Then what?" he asked. I folded the note carefully, the same precise way I had done before, and slid it back toward him. "We prepare," I answered. "Because the moment you confront someone who thinks they are in control, they will protect that control. And I would rather know everything before they even realize we are looking." He stared at the note for a moment, then picked it up, his fingers closing around it more firmly this time. "I should have said something sooner," he murmured. I shook my head once. You said it exactly when you were ready to be heard, I replied. Then I stood up slowly, collecting the documents and placing them back into the folder, not to hide them, but to organize them. This is not about what you should have done, I continued calmly. It is about what we are going to do next. The next 2 days were quiet on the surface, but underneath, everything was moving. I did not call him, and he did not call me. That was intentional. People notice changes in behavior before they notice changes in facts, and right now, facts were what we needed. I spent Thursday morning at the county records office, the kind of place most people forget exists until they need it, fluorescent lights, rows of terminals, and a clerk who barely looked up when I signed in. I sat down at one of the computers and began searching property filings under my son's name, not just the house I already knew about, but anything connected to it. It did not take long. The original deed appeared first, clean, straightforward, his name alone. Then a second filing 18 months later. A transfer of interest. Partial, but significant. Her name added. I leaned closer to the screen, reading every line carefully. It was structured in a way that looked balanced at first glance, shared ownership, joint responsibility, but there was a clause buried 3 paragraphs down that shifted decision authority under specific financial conditions. Conditions that were vague enough to be interpreted broadly. I did not react. I printed the document, folded it neatly, and placed it in my folder. Thank you, I said to the clerk on my way out. She nodded without looking up. That was fine. I was not there to be remembered. By the afternoon, I was sitting in a small office across from a man I had not spoken to in years, my attorney. He had aged, just like I had, but his eyes were the same, sharp, patient, the kind that listened before they spoke. He adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the documents I placed in front of him, page by page, without rushing. I said nothing. I let him see it the way I had. After a few minutes, he leaned back slightly and looked at me. This is structured to consolidate control over time, he said calmly. Not immediately. Gradually. I nodded. Explain, I said. He tapped the clause I had noticed earlier. If certain thresholds are met, financial stress, missed payments, restructuring events, decision authority shifts to the co-holder who initiated the restructuring. In this case, her. I folded my hands in my lap. So even if he did not intend it, I said, he agreed to it. He met my gaze. Legally, yes. I held that for a moment, then asked the only question that mattered. Can it be reversed? He did not answer right away. He studied the document again, then looked back at me. Not directly, he said. Not without triggering the same clauses that give her control. I nodded once. That made sense. Systems like this are not built to be undone easily. Then what can be done? I asked. He leaned forward slightly, his tone still measured. You do not challenge the structure head-on, he said. You find where it depends on cooperation, signatures, timing. You create a situation where he regains independent authority before those clauses can be enforced fully. I did not ask how. Not yet. I understood enough to know the direction. And if she realizes what is happening? I asked. He gave a small, knowing look. Then she will act quickly to secure what she believes is hers. I nodded again, slower this time. That was the part one had expected. I gathered the documents, placing them back into my folder with the same care I had used all morning. When I stood to leave, he added one more thing. Laura, he said, waiting until I looked back at him, this was not an accident. I held his gaze. No, I replied quietly. It was not. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table again, the documents spread out in front of me, the note beside them, and for the first time, the unfinished sentence no longer felt incomplete. I understood it now. She was not just taking money. She was taking position. Authority. Access. Piece by piece, until there would be nothing left that required his consent. I picked up my phone and typed a single message. Tomorrow. Same time. Come alone. I stared at the screen for a second before sending it. Then I set the phone down and folded the note one last time, not as evidence anymore, but as confirmation. You were right to be afraid, I said softly into the quiet room. But you are not alone in this anymore. He arrived earlier this time, 10 minutes before I expected him, and I could tell the moment I opened the door that something inside him had already shifted. Not fixed, not resolved, but aware. Truly aware. I did not sleep, he said as he stepped inside, his voice quieter than before but steadier in a way that mattered more. I nodded once. That means you are thinking, I replied. He followed me into the kitchen, and this time, there was no small talk, no attempt to pretend this was just another dinner. I placed the folder on the table between us and slid it toward him. Read this, I said. He opened it, slower than before, more deliberate, and I watched as the recognition settled in deeper than it had the night before. This clause, he said, his finger tracing the line I had already memorized. This is how she does it, is it not? I met his eyes. Yes, I said. This is how control becomes legal. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. I signed this, he said. It was not a question. You did, I replied. But signing something does not mean you understood it. He nodded once, absorbing that, then looked back at me. So what happens now? I did not answer immediately. I let the silence sit for a moment, not to create tension, but to let the weight of the moment settle where it needed to. Then I spoke. Now you take something back, I said. He frowned slightly. What? I leaned forward just enough to make sure he heard every word clearly. Your position, I said. Before anything else, you re-establish access. Independent access. Accounts she does not control. Records she cannot alter. You do it quietly, and you do it completely. He nodded slowly, the plan forming in his mind as he listened. And then, he asked. Then you stop signing anything, I replied. No documents. No changes. Nothing that moves authority further away from you. He looked down at the table, then back up at me. She is going to notice, he said. Yes, I answered calmly. She will. He held my gaze, waiting. And when she does, he asked. I folded my hands in front of me, steady, controlled. Then she will reveal how much control she believes she already has, I said. And that is when you will finally see the full picture. He was quiet for a long moment after that, then he nodded again, this time firmer. Okay, he said. I understand. I watched him carefully, not for what he said, but for how he said it, and for the first time since that night, I saw something return to him that had been missing. Not confidence. Not yet. But ownership. Even if it was just the beginning of it. He closed the folder and placed his hand on top of it, holding it there like it belonged to him again. I should have paid attention sooner, he said quietly. I shook my head once. You are paying attention now, I replied. That is what matters. He looked at me, and there was something different in his eyes this time. Not fear. Not confusion. Something steadier. You always see things, he said. Before anyone else does. I allowed myself a small, quiet breath. No, I said. I just do not ignore them when they do not make sense. He gave a slight nod, then stood up, holding the folder in his hand. I will handle this, he said. Carefully. I stood as well, walking him to the door. You will, I said. When he stepped outside, he paused for a moment, turning back to look at me. Thank you, he said. I met his gaze, steady as always. I did not do this for you to thank me, I replied. I did it because you asked for help. He nodded once, then turned and walked to his car, the folder still in his hand. I watched him until he drove away, then I closed the door and returned to the kitchen. The note was still there on the table, folded neatly, exactly where it had been from the beginning. I picked it up one last time, running my fingers over the crease, remembering the moment it was given to me, the weight of it, the silence around it. You finished the sentence, I said softly to the empty room. Then I placed the note back down, not as a warning anymore, but as a reminder. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing is not what someone takes from you all at once, but what they take slowly, quietly, until you forget it was ever yours. To begin with. And sometimes, the only way to stop that from happening is to finally look at it clearly and decide that it ends with you.